right, guys. Pythagoras. Excuse me. Pythagoras, right. So when we are talking about Pythagoras, remember Pythagoras is a theorem that we use to work out any side length of a triangle. So Pythagoras says to us, let's maybe not use an equal sign, that our hypotenuse squared, and I'm just going to use a capital H to represent that, is equal to a squared plus b squared. Now, what we need to remember is what all of these things means. H is the hypotenuse, and remember your hypotenuse is the side opposite your right angle, and it is always your longest side. A and B are the two other sides of your triangle. Okay, so that is essentially how Pythagoras works. It works on your two other sides of your triangle, allowing you to get your hypotenuse. Because it's an equation, we can sort of manipulate it and solve for any one of those letters. We can solve for the hypotenuse, we can solve for A, we can solve for B because it's an equation. And so that's why I say Pythagoras can be used to find any side length in your triangle. Right, so if we have a look at our first question, we have been asked to determine the length of AB. Okay, so guys, the first thing that we always want to do is figure out where that side is in our triangle. Here's my side AB. That's the side I want. It's quite clear. Doesn't have a length on it. And the next thing I want to do is I want to figure out where my hypotenuse is. So remember, I go to my right angle. There I am. I look directly opposite me, and the side opposite that right angle is my hypotenuse. Now, it's really important that we know which side is our hypotenuse, so that when we substitute into our formula, we're substituting into the correct places. Now, guys, it makes no difference if this is going to be side A and this is going to be side B. If you swap them around and you said side A, side B, it honestly makes no difference. Okay, it's just the two other sides. Whichever one comes first, it doesn't matter. Right, so we set up our equation. We're looking for the hypotenuse squared. If you want to then state that this is now the side AB squared, that's absolutely fine, is equal to the two other sides squared and added together. So my two other sides are 8, and that's been squared, plus 15, and that's been squared. Remember, you always put your reason Pythag, because technically, this is a concept in geometry. And so we know that in geometry, we always give reasons for our answers. Okay, I'm just grabbing a calculator. Right, so guys, then we essentially go start solving this. So we're going to leave AB squared there for now. We're going to eventually get AB squared. But we've got 8 squared, which is 64. And we've got 15 squared, which is 125. So I'm squaring my two values, and I'm getting an answer there. Also, it's not 125, it's 225. Right, when I add those two together, I end up with 289. So AB squared is equal to 289. And remember grade 8s, I've said this every single time we've done Pythagoras. We want AB, not AB squared. And so therefore, we are going to have to square root. So to get rid of the square, I square root the AB squared, because now it's just AB. But remember, equations, what you do on one side, you have to do on the other side. When you square root 289, you end up with 17. And so AB is equal to 17 centimeters. Right, and again, this is all because we have used the theorem of Pythagoras. All right, sometimes I don't really know what you mean convert. If you mean square root, just always remember that we do need to square root. Okay, so grade 8s, I'm running through this again. We need to listen, and hopefully after this, there should be no questions. So remember, H is your hypotenuse. In this case, this is the side AB. Cool, Simtanda, no problem. We then have our two other sides that we're working with. So we've got side A. It really doesn't matter which side you call side A, but I called that side 8. So in my triangle, that was side AC over here. It's terrible highlighting, but you get the picture. And then we had side B, which in the diagram that we were working with, I used as side BC, so the 15 centimeters. If you swap them, it doesn't matter. Right, then we squared each of these values. So Zoe, in response to your question, 8 squared gives us 64, 15 squared gives us 225. So that's where those values have come from. When we add 64 and 225, we end up with 289. And then, as I've just said, we want AB, not AB squared, and so we have to square root. So guys, when you do Pythagoras, you should always be square rooting before you get your final answer. If you haven't square rooted, you haven't done Pythagoras completely. Once we've square rooted, we get our answer for the length of AB. Right, so that's in essence Pythagoras. It's substituting into an equation and solving for the side that you don't know. So let's take our screenshots. If anyone has any questions, now's the time to raise your hand. Otherwise, we're going to try many, many more in our lesson, and hopefully we feel comfortable with Pythagoras. Exactly like everyone was doing now, guys. If you have questions as I'm going along, put it in the chat and I will answer. All right, so I hope we've all got our screenshots. CM Tanda?
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, I understand the section. I'm just wanting to ask this question only. What if we added 15 centimeters to the square plus 8 centimeters to the square, which will give us 23 to the square, and then you do the conversion, which will give us 529, and then we put a square root over there.
Okay, so you have to square them first. So you can't say 8 plus 15 and then square. It's square first and then add.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. So guys, that's really important. You have to square the numbers first before you add them. If you add them first, you're not doing Pythagoras. Right, Chantal?
Chantal, you need to unmute on your side. There's a pop-up. I'll try again. There's a pop-up on your side, so you just have to click unmute there. There we go.
Ma'am, can I please ask, since it's 8 squared, ma'am, do we multiply it 8 times 8, or we say 8 times 2?
No, we say 8 times 8, the one you said the first time. So this 2 is telling me that I'm taking 8 and I'm multiplying it twice. It's the same thing for 15. This 2 is saying that I'm taking 15 and multiplying it twice.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Sure. Robbie?
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Is it necessary to put the numbers in brackets when you are doing the methods?
You don't have to. I just put them in brackets because it shows that I've substituted them from my diagram. You don't have to. It's not the end of the world.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Sure. All right, guys. So hopefully we've all got our screenshots. Okay, Lyndall, I don't really understand your question, so I'm going to need you to raise your hand to ask it to me. There's no 2. I don't know if you mean like square root in terms of like putting a 2 there, but no, because a square root is automatically 2. If we do cube root, fourth root, etc., then okay, so no, you don't have to write the 2. If you write the 2, it's fine, but you don't have to. Square root is the first root that we use, and then we move up from there. So from cube root, fourth root, fifth root, etc., then we write the number. But square root, we don't. It doesn't matter if you do, but we don't write it. All right, guys, so let's have a look at our second one. So in this question, we've been asked to determine the length of BC. So remember, first thing we do is we just figure out where is BC in our diagram. We see it's this length down at the bottom here. The next thing that we do is we figure out where our hypotenuse is. So here I am at my right angle. I look directly across. What that means is that my 20 centimeters is my hypotenuse. Okay, so this 20 centimeters is my hypotenuse. So when I get to substitute into my equation, that's obviously quite important for me. All right, Robbie, no one's doing any questions just yet. We're doing this together because we've really been struggling, and so I don't feel we're at that point. Right, I need everyone to focus, please. Right, so remember hypotenuse squared is equal to the sum of the square of your two other sides. So I'm just always going to write this here for us, just to remind us what Pythagoras is. But now we can substitute in what we know. So now we know what our hypotenuse is. So that is 20 squared is equal to the sum of my two other sides squared. So it doesn't matter which side you start with. I'm going to go BC squared. That's the one I don't know, plus my other side, which is 6 squared. And so again, I always write Pythag because it's geometry or geometric reason. We have to give it. Okay, so guys, now we start to solve our equation. So 20 squared, whoopsie daisies, is 400. BC squared is still BC squared, and 36 squared is 36. Now remember, you're solving for BC, so we need to use our inverse operations in order to solve this equation. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get this positive 36, and I want it to join the 400, which means I have to use inverse operations and subtract 36 on both sides. So that means I now end up with 400 minus 36 equals BC squared. Now 400 minus 36 is 364 equals BC squared. And like I said 30 seconds ago, whenever you're doing Pythagoras, you need to square root before you get the answer. So because I want BC alone and not BC squared, I square root to get rid of the square. But remember, what you do on one side of the equation, you have to do on the other side. If I square root 364, my calculator gives me an answer that says 2 square root 9. And that's not BC. Now remember, that doesn't really mean much to us, so we can convert that to a decimal. And so BC is equal to 19,08 centimeters. Remember to round off correctly. We've had this discussion already about how to round off. So do remember to round off correctly. But again, you should always be square rooting before your final answer. Once you've square rooted, you should then have your final side length that you were looking for. All right, so guys, we've done sort of the two types of Pythagoras questions that I can give you. So let's just write a little summary for ourselves in order to understand. Can our grade 8s, I really need us to listen because I'm going through this step by step, and unfortunately, like, you choosing not to listen, again, is not my problem, nor is it anyone else's, right? So I have explained where every single thing, where every single step, what every single method is. You need to listen. I don't know how else to say that. Okay, so when I say 20 squared, so 20 times 20 is 400. 6 times 6, 36. Inverse operations means I need to subtract 36 on both sides. 400 minus 36 is 364. I have to square root because I need to get rid of the square. And when I square root 364, I get my final answer of 19,08. What, Rona? I haven't asked for hands yet, so you put your hand down. Right, so guys, if we summarize sort of the two types of questions that we've had a look at, just that we understand that, like I said, there's actually only two ways I can ask this question, right? So I can change the numbers, but if I'm going to ask you to use Pythagoras, there's two ways to do it. So the first way is if we want the hypotenuse, or if we're looking for the hypotenuse. right? If we're wanting or looking for the hypotenuse, we add the side squared and then square root. And if we do that, we're going to get our hypotenuse. But the second way is what we've just done now. And this is if we are, Esther, I've just explained where it came from, right? I've just explained it. So we need to listen. So if we are then wanting one of the other two sides, so basically what that means is not the hypotenuse. This is now where we have to use our inverse operations. And the inverse operation that you're going to use is subtraction. As you saw in this question, we had to subtract the 36. And then again, we will square root our answer. Okay, so if you are looking for a side that is not your hypotenuse, you have the extra step of needing to first subtract and then square root, right? But it doesn't change the fact that we are solving the equation and that we're solving for our unknown. So those are, like I said, guys, literally the two types of Pythagoras questions I can ask you. Either I'm asking you to find the hypotenuse and then you add and then square root, or I'm asking you for a side that's not the hypotenuse, you use the inverse operation, subtract, and then you square root. That's it, right? So there is nothing more that we need to do if we're solving for an unknown side for Pythagoras. It will be one of these two. Obviously, the numbers change, but the method doesn't. All right, so let's take our screenshots. If anyone has any questions at this point, now's the time to raise your hand. But guys, you need to be listening. Like, I don't know what other words to use to say that to you. And unfortunately, it is just a small one or two people choosing not to. That, as Yolanda said, we just won't answer the questions if they're repeated. Imange?
Hi, ma'am.
Hello?
So for at the beginning, so it says 20 squared. I mean 20 in brackets and then squared.
Mm-hmm.
For that, can you like put the 20 in brackets plus the 6 in brackets squared, and then can you say equals to BC at the end?
You can do that, but remember, then you have to then say 20 minus 6 squared. So if you're going to do that, I've got no issues with that. Oh, golly, got no issues with that, but you would have to say 20 squared minus 6 squared is equal to BC squared, because then essentially what you need to remember is that the 6 squared is coming over, so it needs to become negative. So it's fine if you want to do that. That's absolutely fine, but remember it must be minus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Zoe, I don't understand what you mean that I'm in the way of the notes. I don't understand that, but okay, I've moved it a bit. I don't know. Let's hope it works.
We can see the screen clearly on my side. I'm not sure, maybe she referred to the pink writing there, but we can now see fully. So you can take your screenshot.
Okay. Verona?
Afternoon, ma'am.
Afternoon.
For the inverse operation, I said BC squared equals 400 minus 36, ma'am. Can you still write
That's
it
fine.
that way, ma'am?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you've got the minus, that's good. I don't like, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Good. Amatle, oh. Amatle?
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask if we have the hypotenuse, do we subtract or do we add?
We subtract.
So, ma'am, if we don't have the hypotenuse, we add.
Exactly. That was probably a much simpler summary that you've just done versus my nonsense. So let's actually maybe put that there as well. You summarized
Thank
that much better than I was doing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to go off what Amatle said. Those of you that are struggling to see the pink notes, listen. So if you have the hypotenuse, we add, then square root. If you know, sorry, maybe English needs to be better here. If we have the hypotenuse, we need to subtract, then square root. If we want the hypotenuse, we add and then square root. Okay, so recap. Have hypotenuse, subtract, then square root. Want hypotenuse, add, then square root. Much better summary than my nonsense. Hold on, Amatle. Right, last one, Atlachang.
Ma'am.
Yeah.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, do we always have to like change it?
What do you mean change it?
Ma'am. The answer, ma'am.
Yes, you always have to square root, yes.
Ma'am?
You always have to square root.
Oh, yes, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, cool. Alrighty, guys, so let's have a look at question C here. Now I'm going to ask that you guys try this by yourself. I'm going to help you a little bit. We have been asked to find the length of AB. So I go and highlight AB for myself. There it is. Now that I know where AB is, the next thing that I do is I identify my hypotenuse. Here's my person, look directly opposite. AB is in actual fact the hypotenuse. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do for you, we're going to bring this lovely summary that Amatle gave us down. Okay, so remember what we've got in yellow here. In this case, we want the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is the thing that we are looking for. So that is your clue on how to do this. So let's give it a try. So you're trying this one by yourselves. Let's see what we get for AB. Remember, there are units, it's in centimeters. Just remember to put your units there. And always remember, exactly like Vashali's put there on the chat, and I'm sure a couple others as I'm seeing them come through. We always need to remember to put our reason for using Pythagoras. Okay, so guys, while you're doing this, I'm just going to remind you that if for whatever reason you have to leave the call drops, load shedding, whatever, you need to go and watch the videos. Okay. I'm also going to remind you that if this stuff is not making sense to you, we did the whole of last week's lessons on Pythagoras. So again, lessons are recorded. You need to go and watch them. Right. So it's really important that you do go back and consolidate for yourself. I'm going to give you another minute. Nice, grade 8s. Okay, let's have a look. So we know that we want our hypotenuse, so that would be AB squared is equal to our two other sides squared. So 24 squared plus 7 squared. Again, you don't have to use the brackets. I just use brackets to show my substitution. Also remember, I've told you this before, if you're then substituting a negative, we have to remember that a negative squared is a negative times a negative, so actually a positive. All right, but AB squared is then equal to 576 because 24 squared is 576. Plus 7 squared, which is 49. Right, when you add those two values together, you get 625. So AB squared is equal to 625. And then remember, we don't want the squared, so we need to square root both sides in order to get just AB by itself. And when you square root 625, you get that AB is equal to 25 centimeters. Alrighty, so again, we've wanted the hypotenuse. So according to our little sort of cheat sheet here, we add the two sides, then we subtract square root. Okay, so guys, like I said, Pythagoras, literally those are the two types of questions. Either I'm going to ask you for the hypotenuse or I'm going to ask you for one of the other sides. That is it. There'll be different numbers, there'll be different values, but the method remains the same. Okay, so let's take our screenshots. If anyone has any questions, now's the time to raise our hands. Please don't forget that your answer must have centimeters. Okay, it's a length, it needs to have its units. Right, so again, we're screenshotting. If anyone has questions that they haven't asked, you can raise your hand. I didn't see any questions on the chat, but there is your opportunity now to ask. Otherwise, I think we deserve a bit of a brain break, even though we've only done 3 questions. I know that we've been struggling with this. So we're going to take a little brain break and then we're going to carry on. Lala, I'm not too sure what you mean solve for x. If you mean equations, no, because we're doing Pythagoras. If you mean like one of the sides is x and we're doing Pythagoras still, I'm pretty sure I have an example like that coming up. I stand to be corrected. But we're not doing equations right now because we're doing Pythagoras. There are equations videos though that you can go and watch. All right, brain break. I hope you enjoy the joke. It's very much Pythagoras themed. All right, guys, so, okay, so come on, Matlala, I'm pretty sure I have one coming up. I mean, like I said, I stand to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure. Let's actually just see. Oh, no, don't. Okay, I'll just put an X somewhere. Doesn't matter. I'll put an X and then we can have a look. All right, guys, so you know how the brain break works. If you don't and you're new and you just haven't listened, brain break, we are looking at our little puzzle here. And what we want to do, remember, is we want to find the final value of this last equation. So you need to look carefully at how many of each picture you have in order to solve that equation there. And remember, first person who gets it, will explain it. Robbie, I don't know what you mean. Can we move on to the next topic? We have a set number of lessons for Pythagoras. I only finished Pythagoras on Wednesday, so we move on to the next topic on Monday. We don't get to just chop and change. We follow what the government says we need to do per term. So we're on track, so don't stress. Right, we're doing the brain break though. Let's have a look. Well, Gabriella, then you need to go and watch the videos. Yeah, everything that we've done so far this year, there are videos for. So you can go and watch those videos for revision purposes. Yeah, I've seen a whole one person make an attempt at the brain break. So I'm going to be honest, guys, we're not going to try then. I don't need to do brain breaks anymore. I'm going to give everyone a second or two just to give it a try. I'll let you know who's gotten it right and who can explain it for us. Nice. Okay, so the first person to get it right was Nomkutano, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Nomkutano. So if you would like to raise your hand, and if you want to explain it for us how you got there, that would be amazing. Otherwise, I'll go on to the next person. But you were the first person to get the right answer, so well done. Hey.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am, for the first part, I got 10 plus 10 plus 10 equals 30. So since there's two whiches, I got that as 5. One which equals 5. Then I used an additive inverse to get what I minus 5 from 25. And then I got 20. So I divided 20 by 5.
Nice.
That gave me 4. So 1 goes equals 4. And then I use my additive inverse again for the third part. So I said 152 minus 8 since there's 2 ghosts. And then I got another 8. And then I divided 152 by 8, which gave me 18.
Nice.
So 2 of the pitchforks is 18. And I got 8. And I got 8 plus 5 times 9. And that gave me 53.
Nice.
With bod mass.
Well done. Good. Exactly, guys. Very important there. Bod mass. Exactly. So we have to do the 5 times 9 first, which is 45, and then we say 45 plus 8. And I like the fact that we're talking about those inverse operations that we need to be doing. That's the whole point of these, right? We are essentially dealing with an equation, and to solve an equation, we use an inverse operation. Very nicely done, though, and well done to everyone who also got 53. Very, very nice. Alrighty, guys, so let's have a look here at question D. So if we're going to use x as was requested, I'm going to make my unknown side length, horrible x. All right, so it says determine the unknown length. We can now say determine the value of x, but here's my unknown length. That's what I'm needing to solve for in this Pythagoras question. Once we have that, remember we go and identify where our hypotenuse is. So the hypotenuse is actually 14. And remember, we've got our little rule. Okay, I've still got it copy pasted. We have our little rule. Depending on what we have, depending on what we want, we do slightly different things. In this question, I have the hypotenuse. So we need to bear that in mind. Okay, so I've helped you a little bit. I want you to try this question by yourself. We're solving for this value of x. Let's see, oh golly, let's see what we get. All right, so you're trying by yourself, solving for x. I've got your little sort of cheat sheet up there in yellow. Let's give it a try. And remember, guys, we've got no issues with decimal answers. That's fine. A length can be a decimal. Remember, we always try round off to 2 decimal places. Obviously, you need to go according to the instructions given to you. But in general, we work with 2 decimal places. Remember your reasons. Right, everyone getting 17.2. You are not doing your operations correctly. I've highlighted for you exactly what you need to do. I've got the information up there for you, so please let's just be very careful. Go double check your operations. All right, I'm going to give you 1 more minute and then I'm going to go over it. Well done, those of you remembering your reasons as well. Atlahang, it sounds like you're struggling with like network strength. So my suggestion is log out and log back in, or unpin and repin my screen. Yeah, it might just be a case of slow network and things loading slowly. And just remember everything is recorded. Right, guys, let's have a look. Now, I did already say that those of you getting 17.20 need to double check your operations, but let's have a look. Right, we know where our hypotenuse is. Remember, Pythagoras says to me that the hypotenuse squared is equal to the sum of the square of your 2 other sides. So again, I'm writing it here so that we hopefully remember what we're working with, and then we can substitute in what we know. So we know the hypotenuse. Remember, we're at this one here where we have the hypotenuse. So in this case, my hypotenuse is 14 squared is equal to the x squared, that's one of my sides, plus the second side, which is 10 squared. And this is all because of Pythag. Right, so according to our rule, if we have the hypotenuse, we're going to subtract and then square root. Now, guys, what's really important is that the subtraction is always hypotenuse minus the other side, always. Okay, so if we go and do our inverse operations here, 14 squared is 196, if I remember my squares, yeah. 196 is equal to x squared plus 100. So as I was saying, it is always hypotenuse minus the other side. We take the 100 and we're going to use inverse operations, subtract 100 on both sides. That's where the subtraction comes in. And so we have 196 minus 100 is equal to x squared. 196 minus 100 is then nice and easy. 96 is equal to x squared. Whoops, I'm running out of space. Okay, I'm going to have to carry on up here. Now remember, We don't want x squared, we want x. So we have to square root both sides. That's exactly what I told you need to do. Once you've subtracted, then we square root. The square root of 96 then gives us x is equal to 9,80 centimeters. And guys, the decimal is 9,797,958, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole long thing. This third 7 rounds the 9 up to 10, which rounds the 7 up to 8. That's why it's 9,980. So just be careful of your rounding. But exactly, guys, I've given you the cheat. I've given you the directions. If you have the hypotenuse, you're going to have to subtract, and it will always be hypotenuse minus the other side, and then you will square root. All right, so let's take our screenshots. If anyone has any questions, now's the time to raise your hand. I hope we've marked.
You did well, my babes. You guys did well. Remember, we have a poll to do also.
Okay, guys, like Linda said, it is practice. Like, you have to practice this. If you just Google Pythagoras questions, you will get to many, many options. If you go back to the videos, there's lots of questions in the videos, and then obviously you have the explanation. You have to practice maths. That's all there is to it. Chantal?
Ma'am, can I please ask, if you don't put the centimeter by the end, ma'am, the answer is wrong?
So it depends. Sometimes teachers will take off a mark, sometimes they won't. It depends if there's a mark for it. Usually we don't take off a mark. I personally generally do take off marks, but it's not the end of the world if you don't, but you should.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, guys, I assume we've all got our screenshots. I don't think we're gonna have time for another one. So you're gonna
Is it
see
okay if I run the poll?
Yeah. So I was just about to say, you'll see your poll pop up. And don't forget to do the poll, guys. And please remember, go and watch the videos. Seth, sort of same answer to Chantal's question. If there's a mark for rounding, and specifically if the question had said round off to the nearest whole number, or round off to the nearest centimeter, or round off to 1 decimal place, if the question specifically told you what to do, then yes, you will lose a mark. If not, probably not. Your teacher might make a comment on your page like, remember your rounding, but yeah, it honestly just depends on if there's a mark for it.